Okay, so today what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back through the demo of the flaming cell phone in the hand. So I'm just going to go ahead and take my images here, drag them into Bridge. Oh, I forgot to get rid of my images from the demo yesterday. I'm going to throw those away. Okay, so we have these two images. And again, I'm going to go through it fairly quickly. If you want a more in-depth sort of demo on this, I'll be posting that. That's the lecture 2 from last week. But I'm still going to take some time to talk about them. You know, again, this demo could be done in 5 minutes. It's not a very difficult image to get to, but it's understanding what is happening. So let's talk about the fact that I know I want to put this fire in this cell phone. So I'm going to open both of these images in Photoshop to work on them. So holding down the Command key, I go to the fire image. So I have these two images selected, and if I double click, it will now take me to Photoshop. And as you can see, Photoshop is up here in the corner, and you should see a hand with a cell phone in it. Okay. There's also another file here, the fire file, which is a block of wood about the size of that cell phone that was set on fire and photographed. So I'm going to be combining these two images. So what I want to do is I want to get this fire image into the phone file. I have several ways of doing that. And that is the thing that this concept that I want you to take from this is in Photoshop, you will often have multiple ways to get to the same place. It's often just about how you like to work, what's more comfortable for you, which do you do? When you start working in Photoshop, and I mean really working in Photoshop, things can get very confusing because you're going to have multiple layers, you're going to have multiple images, you're going to have pieces of things. Today, we're going to talk about masks and all kinds of stuff. And so Photoshop is this extremely powerful tool, but it's difficult. I used to say it was like driving a stick shift, which is maybe it was 10 years ago. Now I think it's more like driving a helicopter. To really know how to do it, how to use it to its full potential, there are a lot of pieces that go along with this. And we are barely scratching the surface, but you'll see how complicated it sort of gets. But with that said, so let me go ahead and go to the fire image. Now, there's only one layer in here, which is the background layer. If this had 6 or 7 layers, I could choose any one of them. I could choose multiple versions of them. You know, I could go through and select 2 of the 7 layers, whatever. But in this case, I'm going to select the background layer. I'm going to go to duplicate layer. It's going to ask me, I get a chance to name it. So I'm going to say fire. And then it's going to ask me the destination. I'm going to go to the phone file because remember, that's where I want to put it. I hit OK. Again, doesn't look like anything's happened. But if I go to the phone file, I will now see the fire layer as well as the background layer. So that's a way to get both of those layers together. Okay, so that's one way. Another way is simply to click and drag this image into this one and let it go. And now you'll see it's not named, but it is the fire layer on top of this one. I can also go to the fire layer, go to Command A, which is select all, Command C, which is copy, then go to the phone layer and go to Command V, which is paste. And I can paste that layer in. So those are just 3 ways. I'm sure there's probably a couple of others. These are the ones that I use most often. I'm going to double click on this and name this one fire. Now, remember, when we're working with layers, the background layer down here with the hand, it's like the pixels have been glued to a piece of board or something like that, a canvas. Okay, this other layer is like the pixels are floating above it on a piece of plastic so that you can do things. If I want to take an eraser and erase through this layer, it will show the layer below it. Okay, so keep in mind what's happening. All right. So in this case, I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to make the background layer. Now, what I want to do is I want to move this cell phone down more to the center so I'll have room to put those flames in. If I just take my move tool right now and I drag, it's not going to do anything. If I take the move tool and I press the command key, it's going to give me this note. The layer is locked. So see on the background how the layer is locked, okay? If I were to take my eraser tool and erase it's going to give me a background color. So that bottom layer, when it's a background layer, is always going to be like there's a board underneath it. But if I go ahead and double click on it, now if I were to erase, you see how it becomes transparent, how I can move this layer on top of this one and allow the layer below to show through. So understanding how layers work, how a background layer works, and all of that is important. So again, another one of those concepts I want you to understand. So in this case, I'm not even going to move the fire in yet. I'm just going to go ahead and take this layer. I'm going to turn it into not a background layer. Now, if I take my move tool and I click and drag, see how it allows me to drag those pixels down? So it allows me to drag those pixels down around wherever I want to put it. It also shows me that there's a transparent, basically I dragged them on this piece of plastic. There's nothing behind here. Here is the size of our canvas, but basically it's like I'm working on a piece of plastic that is that size. Why that is important is because I want to have this background be all the same color. So I have a couple of options. If I just go to a new layer, so I went down here to the plus sign, added a new layer, and go to Edit, Fill, and I go ahead and choose black, right? Oh, that looks like a black background. Make sure Preserve Transparency is turned off, and I hit OK. Those pixels are sitting over top of this one, but if I drag it underneath, now that area that was transparent is showing the layer below. But you'll also see that I filled this layer with black. This background wasn't really black. It was kind of a charcoaly black. So now I have a couple of options. I have a couple of ways of extending that background through the whole thing, okay? The first is I can turn the hand layer on, go to Image, Adjustments, Levels. I can come over here and take the black eyedropper. And if I click on the background here, what I'm telling the computer is I want that background to be black. And it's going to change, I'm pointing at my screen. It's going to change all of these pixels to make these black. So watch what happens. I click on it, everything gets a little darker, but you'll notice there's no line here anymore. So see this layer? No line there anymore. It just, I've changed this background to black, okay? All right, now, the other thing I can do is, let's say I don't want the background to be black. I don't want to change the color of these pixels. I just want that same background back there, okay? What I can do is I can make this layer active here, layer 1, which is the black background. I can go to Edit, Fill. Now I'm going to fill that background, and I can hit here, instead of black, I can hit color. It's going to ask me to choose a color. It's also going to give me an eyedropper. I can come over here to this background that isn't completely black and click on it. And you'll see how it says, oh, there's the new color. I hit OK here. Make sure Preserve Transparency is not checked, and I hit OK. And see how it fills this background now, layer 1, is the exact same shade of black as is on my hand file. Okay, so that's another way of doing it. The other thing I can do is simply take a rectangular marquee tool select a band of black, hit Command T, which is free transform. I'm holding down the Shift key and I can drag those pixels straight up. And that is going to just drag that color straight up. Now it's going to drag whatever pixels are there too. So if I happen to select this and hit Command T, it's going to drag those pixels up. That's not what I wanted to do. I just wanted the black dragged up. So those are all different ways of getting your image to the same place. I still think the hand's a little high for me, so I'm going to bring it down here. Maybe move it over just a touch. I can even go to free transform if I wanted to have just a little bit of movement to it. Hit return. Okay, now in this case, I have this background is slightly off, so there's going to be some transparent areas. So this is a time that I might want to go ahead, take a layer, go to Edit, Fill, use a color, go ahead and select that color, hit OK, fill it in, drag it down here. Now, if I don't want to have two layers, because it takes up room, I can go to this layer, and I can come over here and I can go to Merge Down. And what that does is it takes this layer and merges it with the other layer. So it's like taking those two pieces of plastic and gluing them together. Now, the weird part is there's still a little piece over here that seems to be transparent. So I'm going to go ahead and do the free transform thing and just drag that over. I don't know why sometimes it does that. You know, it's one of those weird things, this glitchy sort of thing that computers do. But anyways, I like the way that hand looks better. So now I'm going to come over here to the fire. I'm going to go ahead and go to duplicate layer. I'm going to name it. I like using this because I like to name it as it goes over. Now you'll notice I can go to the phone file. I can also open it in a new file. So sometimes I'll just open things in a new file that I know I'm bringing other files into. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and put it in the phone file. Hit OK. Again, doesn't seem to be any different. But when I come over here, I will see that it has been moved into that layer. Now, what I want to do, and you'll see it's called a background because that's what it came as, but it's not locked. So it actually isn't pasted onto like a piece of board. If I erase this layer, it's going to show the layer below. So even though it's called a background layer, it doesn't function the same way as a locked background layer. All right, so now, why didn't it call it fire? Didn't I ask it to name it fire when it brought it in? Did I forget to do that? To name them, you just double click on them. Depending on how big your file is going to be, how many layers you're going to have, sometimes it's better to name them so you can remember what's happening as opposed to just leaving them layer 1, layer 2. Sometimes the thumbnails are hard to see. So often I will name my layers just so I know which one I'm working in. So right now the hand layer is active. See how it's grayer? Now the fire layer is active. Reason why I want you to understand that is if I'm on the hand layer and I go ahead and hit opacity, I'm not changing the opacity of the fire layer, even though it's on top. What I've changed is the opacity of the hand layer. So remember, even though you can see this layer, you may be making the changes to the layer below it. So now I just went back up to 100 and there it is. So I want to go to the fire layer. I want to bring the opacity down so I can sort of see through it. And what I want to do is I want to take this block of wood and I want to move it so that it's aligned with that cell phone. I'm going to go ahead and hit Command T. I'm going to go ahead and rotate these pixels. And then I'm going to slide it up till it's on there. I'm going to hit return. And I'm going to change the opacity back to 100. Why am I doing that? Because instead of changing the opacity to allow the hand to show through, what I want to do is I want to change the blending mode. And what the blending mode is, we've talked about this briefly before, is that it's how these pixels interact with the pixels below. So here's your blending modes. If I go to dissolve, you don't really see much. If I go to darken, multiply, color burn, and what's nice about Photoshop is you can kind of go through these. Lighten is the one I tend to like. There's also screen, which isn't bad. Color dodge if you want a whole different feel to it. Linear dodge looks okay. Lighter color sort of works. Then you have things like overlay, hard light, you know, so you can go through these and see what they look like. But I'm going to go back to lighten. I think that one works the best. Now, I don't really like the way the fire's lined up in the hand. I don't like the fire going over the fingers. I want to bring it back in. You know, I'm going to go to Command T. I'm going to rotate it back just a touch. I could change the size of it if I wanted to. Kind of like the way that looks. I like the fire coming off the finger here. I like the little way it moves here along the edge of the cell phone. If I want to move it just a little bit and I'm finding it hard to move with the mouse, the little arrow keys that are on my laptop on the bottom to the far right, the up, down, left, right, a lot of times gamers, I guess, have to use those. I'm not really a gamer, but those are the nudge tools. So you can nudge this up or down or to the side. So it moves it basically one pixel at a time so that you can get it where you want it. Okay, so that looks about right for me. I kind of like the way that looks. I'm going to go ahead and hit return. And that has made don't understand why it's not. Okay, that's better. Okay, now, even though I have it all lined up the way I like it, and it looks pretty good, I don't like that I can still see the stand from this block of wood. I don't like that little bar across the top I might want to get rid of. But first, I'm going to concentrate on this sort of stand that's showing up. Now, you can just take the eraser tool. And again, remember across the top here are the sort of settings for it. So I have it at 100%. And I can just come in here and I can erase that stand. I don't like that little thing that shows up out there. So I can come through and erase the pixels. Now what I've done is I've erased the actual pixel information. And I can keep, you know, what I usually do is I kind of clean up after I get these erased because I don't want that line to show up. I want to sort of soften it a little bit. So I can go ahead and erase that. Now the problem with that is if for any reason I want to bring any of those pixels back or I'd have to start all over. So I'm just going back to before I use the eraser. Okay. So instead of getting rid of those pixels, what I want to do is I just want to keep them from showing up. I just don't want to be able to see them. So again, we do this all the time in Photoshop. Is it affecting the pixels or is it just the way we're looking at it on the computer? In this case, I'm going to go ahead to this little icon down here. It's the add layer mask, and I'm going to put the layer mask on. What a layer mask is is it's almost like erasing. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a brush and I'm gonna paint with black. I'm gonna make sure this layer mask is active, which is the white bumpers around it. And as I paint with black on that layer mask, it looks like I am erasing those pixels. But here's the thing, those pixels aren't gone. Watch what happens. If I unlink this and I take my move tool, I come over here, all those pixels are still there, okay? They're just being masked from showing up below, okay? The great thing about using a mask is, if I paint with black, it's like erasing. But because I haven't gotten rid of the pixels, if something happens, oh, that took too much off, I can flip this around and paint with white and bring those pixels back in, okay? So in this image, it's not all that important that you use a layer mask, but you'll start to see as you build more layers and masking things out and you're coming back and you have to redo something, that a lot of times it's a great way. It's also when I'm cleaning up something really fine, I won't use an eraser because if I erase it, I can't get it back. But I'll use a layer mask because I can come back in and, oh, look, I didn't get rid of that, or oh, I got rid of too much. And it allows me that freedom to come back in and operate a little bit more on it to make some changes. So in this case, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and work in the layer mask. I'm going to make sure black. And I'm just going to come down here and erase this stuff that I don't want. I'm going to take a look at it. I often erase the hard edges because those are the things that will show up sometimes in an image. You don't see it sometimes when you're just working on your screen, but I always like to sort of feather the edges. It just helps them out a little bit. Now, I'm a little worried about over here, so I'm going to flip it around and bring some of that back in because I want that little bit of glow. I might have erased too much down here. All right, so that looks pretty good. Right now, that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and go to File, Save As. And the other thing I want you to understand is that you want to save as you work. Should something happen, your computer gets shut down, it crashes, something like that, which happens a lot in Photoshop, especially if you're trying to do big files. You want to be able to go back to the last place you saved it. Also, if I do a few things and I decide I don't like it, I can always come back and revert. Oops, painting with the wrong color. And I can always come back and revert to this place. So you have to think about saving as you're working. All right, so all of that looks pretty good. Now, I don't like this line coming through here. So what I want to do is I want to make sure the fire layer is active. I want to make sure the thumbnail, not of the mask, but of the pixels themselves, is active. I want to zoom in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just use the smudge tool here. And across the top, you can change the strength of your smudge tool and you can change the size of your brush. I'm going to go ahead and smudge that corner up and around. Okay, I like the way this blue looks. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger and I'm going to just sort of smudge that. Remember, the smudge tool allows you to work almost like it's finger painting. I'm going to change the strength here a little bit and then I'm going to change it make it bigger and just sort of give it an overall blur. And you can see that's using a lot of computer power. So that looks about the way I want it to. Now, again, I could, you know, I could change the way some of these other flames appear, depending on what it is that I'm trying to get out of my image here. So again, that was a big brush, a lot of pixels to sort of deal with. And this is often when your computer will crash, do things like that. Give it a little bit of time to work sometimes. It just needs that time to compute. Now it's starting to worry me though. So when it's worrying me, I go to Finder. And I'll go to Force Quit to see if Photoshop is not responding. No, it's fine. And I guess it's completed my request. So let's see here, back into Photoshop. All right. So I don't necessarily like that much. It looks a little too electric to me. I probably would have done a little bit less. So I can go now to File, Revert. And now I'm back to where I had saved it last. So now I don't want to do that much smudging. That was too much. I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in, take the smudge tool. I did like that one. And I may just do this just a little bit. Well, I want to get rid of that. I must not have saved it after I got rid of that. Okay, so back to the smudge tool. I don't know, this corner just sort of bothers me, but oh, I'm smudging the mask. That's what I told you not to do. Okay, that looks better to me. Now, if I were done, but I'm not sure if I'm done, I'm just going to go to File, Save. And it's going to save it as the Photoshop document for me. So now I still have all my layers. When you are ready to be done to turn it into me, go to File, Save As, and save it as a JPEG, and hit Save. All right, so now, turn that. Now if I go back to Bridge, you should see my two original files. Here's my in progress. So if I go to the one that's in progress and I double click on it, you'll see it's the in progress one and it still has my layers on it. If I go back to Bridge and I double click on the done JPEG, you'll notice it's been merged down to a single layer, okay? So you have to decide, are you gonna go back and work on it? Possibility. It's going to take up more space if you save it as a Photoshop file. And then you need to save it as a JPEG to turn it into me, or sometimes to post or to do anything that you want to do with it. So that is the end of that demo.